Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a conflict in the Middle East that exploded just 4 days ago and is already reshaping the entire global landscape. When people who actually live there are asked to describe what's happening, they use one word: apocalypse. And that is a powerful, frankly terrifying word. As we're about to see, it is not an exaggeration. So let's break down how it all happened. So, how did we get here so fast? Well, just look at this timeline. This wasn't a slow burn. This was a straight-up explosion. It started with a massive strike, which was met with immediate retaliation, which then kicked off total chaos in the oil markets, and now it's already spilling over into brand new wars. It all began with a very specific, and I mean devastating goal: to decapitate the Iranian regime. We're not talking about a ground invasion here. This was a surgical and absolutely brutal strike aimed right at the heart of Iran's power structure. And when we say decapitation strike, they weren't kidding. The very first and most critical target was Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. He was killed in the opening hours, creating this massive power vacuum from the second the war began. In a pretty blunt statement, President Trump claimed the initial strikes were a huge success. He said that not only were Iran's naval and air assets hit, but that most of the regime's intended successors were also killed, basically just dismantling their entire chain of command. The scale of this air campaign was just massive. We're talking about Israeli forces hitting over 1,000 targets across Iran. And they didn't just hit military hardware. They went after state broadcasters to shut down propaganda, airports to stop movement, and even alleged underground nuclear sites. But here's the thing: Iran was not knocked out, not by a long shot. Instead, its retaliation has engulfed the entire region in a firestorm. Tehran's strategy became crystal clear and fast. If you're hosting American forces, you are now a target. And just look at the sheer volume of firepower they unleashed. It's staggering. The UAE alone got hit with over 170 ballistic missiles and almost 700 drones in just 3 days. And, critically, Iran also managed to hit the U.S. embassies in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, which forced Washington to shut down its diplomatic missions all over the region. Iran also went on the attack economically by basically choking the Strait of Hormuz, that tiny channel where a fifth of all the world's oil passes through. They made shipping insanely risky. And the result? The cost to hire an oil tanker quadrupled, practically overnight. So this war is no longer contained. It is spilling everywhere. Israel is now hitting Hezbollah and Lebanon, and a whole separate deadly war has just erupted on the Afghan-Pakistani border. But, beyond all the geopolitics and military moves, there is a devastating human price being paid on the ground. Let's talk about that human cost. Because for millions of civilians, ordinary people trapped in cities like Tehran, this war has become an absolute nightmare of survival. And it's the civilians who are paying the ultimate price. This number, 165, it's just gut-wrenching. On the very first day of the war, 165 schoolgirls were killed when their primary school was hit by missiles. And with hospitals destroyed and the power grid just gone, the healthcare system has completely collapsed. Medical supplies are non-existent. We're hearing stories of doctors who survived the bombings now performing surgery by the light of torches and cell phones. And for the people who managed to survive the bombs, starvation is the very next threat. The price of a single kilogram of potatoes in Tehran has shot up nearly 7 times in just a week. Basic survival is now something people can't afford. Now, you might be thinking this is all just happening over there, but the shockwaves from this crisis are already being felt all across the globe, affecting everything from international politics to the price you pay at the pump. The most immediate impact was on energy prices. Brent crude oil spiked, wholesale gas prices in Northern Ireland almost doubled, and in Ireland, home heating oil jumped 26% in just 4 days. These are real costs felt by real people, thousands of miles away from the fighting. The war is also creating these deep political rifts. President Trump publicly slammed the UK Prime Minister for being hesitant about using British bases for the strikes. And even within the UK, the conflict has just exposed these raw divisions, with Northern Ireland's DUP backing the strikes, while Sinn Féin condemns them, pointing to that horrific civilian death toll. But while the world was grappling with this spiraling crisis, something just bizarre and completely surreal was happening at the UN headquarters in New York. In what was actually a historic first for a presidential spouse, First Lady Melania Trump presided over a meeting of the UN Security Council. And the topic of this meeting? Protecting children from the harmful effects of technology. Yeah, the irony of that was just staggering, and it was not lost on anybody. Late night hosts like Jimmy Kimmel immediately jumped on it, pointing out the surreal spectacle of the First Lady talking about children's well being, while the war her husband started was killing children overseas. So, this bizarre contrast, right, between a brutal real world tragedy and this kind of political stagecraft, it leaves us with a really unsettling question. When a war is unfolding in real time, right next to moments like this, our attention gets pulled in 1,000 different directions. And in this new reality, figuring out what actually matters, the signal from the noise, is maybe the biggest challenge of all.